What if Luke Skywalker... What if Darth Vader stopped Luke Skywalker from falling in Empire Strikes Back? That's what I want to explore today. I hope you enjoy. Please leave a like, it helps a lot, so thanks, and let's get right into this. Darth Vader looked down at the boy clinging to the ledge, barely hanging on over a fall that was sure to either kill him or leave him stuck at the bottom. Luke looked up at Vader, his hand severed off, and Vader offered a new hand, his own to take right here. Luke could grab it and go with his father. Perhaps he could be turned back to the light. No, Luke knew he was gone, and so Luke looked down and decided he would rather risk death than go with this man. And so he jumped, and Vader watched him fall and had to make a choice. He could catch his son and bring him with, or he could let Luke choose his own path. But Vader could not help himself now, and he reached out into the Force, grabbing Luke, freezing him in the air. Again, Luke screamed out in fear, agony, and panic, until the panic resulted in Luke going completely unconscious. Vader lifted him up and held the unconscious Luke in his arms as he walked back to his ship. Meanwhile, Leia, Lando, and Chewbacca escaped Bespin in the Falcon, and Leia never sensed anything from Luke. Han was taken to Tatooine with Boba Fett. The rebellion had lost today, and the disappearance of Luke was going to be tough to overcome. On Dagobah, Yoda meditated deep into the Force until the Force spirit of Obi-Wan Kenobi showed up next to him. Both of them could feel what had happened. Luke had been taken by Vader. What happens next is up to him alone. The two Jedi Masters discussed other options. Ezra Bridger, Cal Kestis, Ahsoka Tano, and all other known survivors were in hiding, dead, or missing. Obi-Wan brought up Leia, but both of them knew that her path was not through the Force, at least not yet. The rebellion needed her, and Yoda prodded at the ground with his stick, discouraged after all these years of exile. Everything had to be in Luke's hands now. He must choose the right path. And on Vader's Star Destroyer, Luke Skywalker eventually awoke in a prison cell. He looked down to his hand and realized that he had a new one, no longer one of flesh, just like his father's. And he remembered it all, the fight with Vader, the revelation that Vader is his father, being captured by him. Luke began to panic again, but tried to calm himself with the Force. He called out to Ben, but got no response. He was alone. He needed someone. And further in the ship, Darth Vader knelt in front of a hologram of Darth Sidious, the Emperor. Vader reported that he had cornered Luke. He had him, but instead of joining, Vader told the Emperor that Luke jumped to his death. Vader was not lying. He was just hiding the rest of what happened. The Emperor was displeased. Vader knew that he wanted Luke for himself, to kill Vader and replace him with Luke. And the Emperor told Vader that he did well. The rebellion is scattered, weakened, and lost without a base. And the Emperor told Vader to return to Mustafar, continue his training in the dark side, and if the rebellion emerges again, be ready to crush them. Vader nodded and ended the message. On Coruscant, the Emperor watched Vader fade away, and he put his hands together as an evil smile formed on his face. He could sense Vader's fear from worlds away, the small part of Anakin that would never leave. His heart always gave away what he was truly feeling. The Emperor knew that Luke was alive, and now Vader would train the boy, and it would be his undoing. Young Luke Skywalker would be his own, Sidious thought to himself, all in due time. Luke sat in the cell, considering his options, and there was always one option that he came back to, one way that he could defeat Vader, bring hope back for the rebellion. Take Vader and the Empire down from the inside, pretend to join him until the time was right. And the door swung open to reveal Vader, looking down at Luke, and Vader asked how the new hand felt. Luke said it would do fine, standing up in front of him now. Vader told Luke that they need not be adversaries, that he had sensed Luke's power, and together they can destroy the Emperor. Vader told Luke it is the only way to defeat him. They can rule as father and son. Luke thought to himself that it was now or never, and so he got onto his knee, pledging himself to Darth Vader. Luke had Vader right where he wanted him. And Vader watched Luke pledge himself to the dark side, knowing full well that this was only an act from Luke. But Vader knew better than anyone that once you touch the dark side, it will consume you forever. Vader told Luke to rise, and together they took off for Mustafar. On Mustafar, the two of them began Luke's new training. Vader gave Luke the blue lightsaber that once belonged to Obi-Wan before he died, and Luke was not afraid of Vader any longer. He instead embraced this training, the training that would allow him to defeat Vader and get back to the rebellion. Vader taught Luke how to fight in the dark side, how to dive into his emotions of anger, hatred, sadness, fear, and Luke did this using his dark thoughts about Vader to improve his fighting. He hated Vader for killing Ben Kenobi. He was angry at the Empire for hurting his friends. He was sad for Solo, stuck somewhere in Carbonite, and he feared for his friends in the rebellion. While thinking about these things, Luke began to lose control in a training session, blasting force lightning from his fingertips into the wall, and it began to crack. Vader said he did well, and Luke snapped out of this dark side trance, looking down at his hand. What was he becoming? For a month, he'd been training every day, and he was losing more of the Jedi way that Yoda had trained him with. And that same night, Luke knew that it had to be time. He couldn't allow the darkness to consume him forever. He thought to himself that this was the night that he kills Vader, destroy the Emperor. And once again, Luke caught himself. Just a month ago, it was about merely defeating them. Now Luke wanted to destroy the Sith without mercy. He put his head in his hands, telling himself he was a Jedi. But a voice in his head was pushing away the wisdom of Yoda, an old, crackly voice laced with evil. A voice that gave Luke power. He couldn't do this any longer. It must end tonight. Luke grabbed his blue lightsaber, remembered Obi-Wan, and then took off for Vader, who Luke knew was just hanging in the Bacta tank. But in that Bacta tank, Vader could feel every sway and emotion from Luke in the castle. Every night Luke fought with himself, and every night the darkness grew stronger. Vader didn't really sleep anymore. He would drift off into nightmares or visions occasionally, but sleep was something he mostly lived without, and this was good on this night especially, as Vader could feel Luke approaching, light and dark battling inside of him. Tonight, Vader knew that Luke would go full dark side trying to kill him, and Vader waited. He would show Luke the full power of the dark side. Luke entered the room with the Bacta tank, and without hesitating, he blew the glass to pieces with the Force to reveal Vader hanging there. This would be easy. But as Luke tried to take a step forward, he was thrown violently backwards into the wall, and Vader opened his eyes, staring directly at Luke, saying that he was too weak to kill him. Even suspended in the air, Vader was light years ahead of Luke in the Force, and Luke watched as Vader's droids began to put his suit on for him. Luke reached out with his hand, but he was frozen in place now. He couldn't move. But Luke ignited the blue lightsaber and used all of his power to break free from this hold, sprinting now at Vader. But as he reached him and was about to swing, Vader lifted him up, holding his lightsaber back with the Force, and began choking Luke. As Luke was about to go unconscious, Vader threw him with the Force extremely fast, out the door, and Luke slid across the floor until he fell out of the castle entirely. Luke fell and fell to the ground, using the Force to soften his landing as he rolled around on the hot ground below the castle. Luke was dazed, and he lay here struggling to get up. And when he finally looked up, Vader was walking quickly towards him, in his full suit. He ignited his lightsaber and yelled at Luke now, saying, "You lack conviction. You lack power. You are weak." And Vader swung down at Luke, who ignited his blue lightsaber just in time. Luke got to his feet, stumbling backwards. Here he stood, face to face with Vader, and Luke felt the anger, the fear, the hatred coursing through his veins, and he allowed it to happen. He would kill his father right now. And Luke sprinted at Vader, screaming with the dark side. He swung his saber at Vader, and the two locked into a real duel. This was different than the training. Luke had real intent to kill Vader using the dark side. Luke swung at Vader, sparks flying as the lightsabers clashed around them. Vader was letting Luke feel the darkness, and Luke went further and further into it, slamming his lightsaber into Vader's. His determination, his arrogance grew with his power. and soon he was matching Vader blow for blow until the Dark Lord began to back up. Luke had him now. But Vader flipped backwards, now standing above Luke. And Luke felt all-powerful, like no one could stop him. His eyes were filled with an evil stare, looking directly at Vader. And Vader knew what was going to happen next, telling Luke not to try it. But Luke did not listen, and he flipped through the air, intending to land behind Vader. But while in the air, Vader's lightsaber was far too quick. It cut deep into both of Luke's legs and cut off a hand, while slicing his lightsaber in half. And Luke flopped onto the hot ground, slipping down through the rocks, down towards the lava. Vader looked down at his son, screaming in pain as he got closer and closer to the lava. And eventually, Luke stopped slipping and looked up to Vader. Anger and sadness filled his yellow eyes as he begged Vader for help. Luke used his one remaining hand to claw at the rocks, slowly gaining ground back up until he reached his broken lightsaber. The crystal was exposed, and Luke grabbed it. Immediately, the crystal bled into a deep red, causing an explosion of power around them. Vader watched as his son gave himself completely to the dark side. At last, he was ready to truly become his apprentice. And right before the fire could consume Luke, Vader lifted him up with the Force, just like he did on Bespin, and again Luke went unconscious, as Vader carried the reborn Luke into the castle. On Coruscant, Sidious felt this rift in the Force. Luke Skywalker had gone fully into the dark side. Now he will care only about power and who can give him the most of it. This was good. On Dagobah, Yoda grabbed his head and nearly fell to the ground. The last time he felt such a shift like this, Order 66. He knew that the boy he trained was gone, consumed by the dark side of the Force, and Yoda again thought of options to counter the dark side, and came to one option that he'd never really considered: himself. Perhaps it was time to leave this exile and call upon the power of all of the Jedi before death. And he began training himself, with the help of Obi-Wan and Qui-Gon. For another couple months, Vader would continue to train Luke, but now, Luke was so much more willing to be a real student of Vader. He gave himself to the dark side, training religiously, becoming as powerful as Vader, with one common goal between them: defeat the Emperor and take his place. After this time training, the Emperor contacted Vader and said that he would be gone for a while. He was off to Exegol to begin putting together more plans for a new order, if it ever were to come to that. This was true, he was going there, but the Emperor knew that Vader would use this opportunity to come and try to kill him. That was what he wanted. Vader told Luke it was time, and the two of them boarded their ship together. Vader was one of the only other people who knew how to get to Exegol, and they took off. On Dagobah, Yoda had spent the last couple months bringing back his strength in the Force, realizing he will have to be the one to restore the light in the galaxy. And with the Force so engulfed in darkness, the need for balance was desperate. Yoda became strong in the Force, guided by the spirits of those who fell before him, knowing this final battle would be his end. And eventually, he got into a ship that was left here years ago, allowing the spirit of Qui-Gon to guide him the same way he did during the Clone Wars. On Exegol, the Emperor looked at what would someday be a new throne room. The sound of lightning filled the air as he looked at the ancient statues and architecture around him. This place was perfect for his eternal life, and today he would destroy any threat to his rule. He sat on the throne and waited, until eventually he felt their presences. The Skywalkers were here, father and son. The two of them walked in together, igniting their lightsabers, both crimson red as they stood in front of the throne. Palpatine, seated on his ominous Sith throne, had no need for a lightsaber. Today, he would kill Vader and show Luke that the only way to achieve true power was with him. He channeled the raw power of the dark side through his outstretched hands, laughing at the Sith in front of him, and waves of Force lightning rippled outward, shaking the foundations of the lair. Luke and Vader stood side by side, their resolve unwavering as they held their blades and braced themselves against the storm of power. Palpatine's laughter echoed through the chamber as he hurled bolts of surging dark lightning at them. The two Sith apprentices moved in perfect unison with each other, their lightsabers slashing through the air as they deflected the deadly bolts back towards Sidious. The room was filled with the sound of lightsabers and crackling Force energy. Palpatine's assault intensified as bolts of blue lightning arced between his fingers, seeking to consume Vader and Luke. The Sith duo strained against the overwhelming power of the Emperor, their red lightsabers shimmering with dark intent, and they absorbed and redirected all of the lightning. The ground beneath them quaked as the battle raged on. The ancient Sith architecture groaned under the immense strain of the dark side. Pieces of the ground were lifted up and thrown at them. Vader and Luke knew that they had to end this quickly or risk being completely overwhelmed. With a surge of determination, they charged at Palpatine, their red lightsabers forming a protective barrier as they pressed forward against this storm. The room seemed to tremble, and a blinding explosion of dark and light erupted as Luke and Vader pushed through. When the smoke cleared, the Sith throne room was in ruins, and Sidious looked down to see Vader and Luke laying on the ground, overwhelmed by his power, defeated. He laughed again until he felt something familiar. It couldn't be, but the unmistakable sound of the slow walk and the cane tapping the ground was undeniable. Yoda entered the room, looking down at Vader and Luke. He told the two fallen Jedi that he was sorry for failing them, but there is still time for victory. Sidious could not believe this, and he immediately began ripping debris from the ceiling, walls, all around them, and threw it at Yoda. In an instant, Yoda was seemingly buried, but quickly he lifted every single bit of debris, hands lifted in the air, and threw it all back at Sidious at once. The Dark Lord spun out of the way, barely landing to stare back at Yoda. Snarling, he told the Jedi that he could not be defeated. Sidious called upon his power, saying that he is all the Sith. Then Sidious blasted torrents of lightning, stronger than ever, directed at Yoda. But Yoda caught it. He was absorbing it, and he began taking strong steps at Sidious, the lightning doing very little to him as he caught it, redirecting it around the breaking layer. He bore his eyes into Sidious's, and through his strength he said that he was all the Jedi. And Yoda saw flickers of Jedi long dead. Sidious saw them too. Qui-Gon and Obi-Wan, hands outstretched, giving Yoda strength. On the ground, Vader was breathing heavily through his armor. He saw Luke on his knees, looking to Yoda. The old Grand Master was powerful, but he needed a bit more help. Vader grabbed Luke on the shoulder, saying that it was always their destiny to defeat the Emperor, but perhaps the dark side was the wrong path. Vader looked at Luke, and Luke had his now blue eyes, and he decided to help Vader, Anakin, to his feet. Seeing their perseverance, the strength, and the faith in the light side on full display from Yoda inspired them both. And Yoda felt Anakin and Luke now by his side. The two gave Yoda the extra strength he needed to redirect the lightning from Sidious back at him with his full power. Sidious screamed in agony, watching his apprentices side with Yoda as the lightning slammed into him. He didn't have time to preserve his own life, and Sidious was disintegrated on the spot. Suddenly, all was quiet. The Emperor was dead. Luke watched as Yoda fell, and then Anakin fell, dead. He stood in the middle of both of them, light and dark. They were both gone. They used up all their energy, and for the first time in years, Luke felt completely alone. The darkness that held him with Vader seemed to fade away after seeing Yoda's sacrifice, and the light began to come back to him. Here he stood, unsure of what to do. The Jedi were gone. The Sith were gone. He was what remained. But as he walked out and was about to get into his ship, he saw 3 blue Force ghosts emerge. Obi-Wan, joined by Yoda, then joined by who Luke knew to be Anakin. Luke smiled, relieved to not be alone any longer, as he got into his ship to rejoin the rebellion with good news. The Emperor was dead. And with his death, along with the death of Vader, the Empire would fall quickly. Warlords would fight amongst themselves for power while the rebellion grew, and within a year, Coruscant belonged to a new republic. Han Solo was freed by Leia, and Mon Mothma became the Chancellor of what would turn into a new republic. And when it all ended, Luke decided that it was time he tried to rebuild the Jedi Order. And folks, that's our story for today. Let me know what you thought. I had a lot of fun writing this one, so hope you enjoyed listening. Yeah, I liked it a lot, so hope you did as well, and I'll see you in the next video.